Hello and welcome to Newsnight. I am Ladi Akeredoluwale. It's our pleasure to have you join us today. The recent saga of adulterated fuel brought into Nigeria's petroleum product supply system from abroad, leading to disruptions, has highlighted kinks in the country's standards maintenance and enforcement framework. My guest says even though there are well-established standards for the type and composition of fuel expected to be brought in, the absence of an inspection regime by critical agencies at the ports means the chances that negative outcomes will present themselves are higher. Newsnight talks to the Director General of the Standards Organization of Nigeria, Malam Farouk Salim. Malam Farouk Salim, thank you so much for your time. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Many people will see me sitting here talking to you and they will think immediately of what is currently going on across the country, the issue of standardization or the lack thereof of products and services.
Yes.
From the mandate that SUN has,
yes.
SUN has a mandate for manufactured goods largely. But a number of people have mentioned the name of your organization over this issue of the adulterated fuel. Can you differentiate, if indeed there is a differentiation, between what your agency does and if indeed that has anything to do with this kind of process?
When it comes to standardization, we standardize everything, including oil, including your church building and stuff like that. But when it comes to checking items, there are certain limitations put by the law. For example, we have NAFDAC, where Food and Drugs Regulation is their area. But if there is production, we go to the factories, we check the factories. If there is standardization, standards of an item that is food or anything, it comes to SUN. Because how you set standard generally, if I have a little minute, I'll explain to you, is that you get a technical committee, you get stakeholders. So stakeholders will be somebody interested in ginger, for example. Marketers, people who are consumers of ginger, people who produce ginger for whatever purpose they want to do. We sit together with them, we work with them on what they expect the standards to be and grades for that product. So then we get the standards to the National Council, which is the SUN Council. When they approve that, it becomes a national standard. It becomes Nigerian standard. So the oil, the petrol, in 2017, with the help of the Federal Executive Council and the former Minister of Environment, those standards together with the stakeholders were set. And eventually it was accepted by the Minister of Industry at that time, who was the head of the council. Because originally when the problem started, they thought it's going to add cost to the Nigerian petroleum. But we pay premium price for the oil. So whatever standard we put, as long as it's at the level or close to the level of premium, there will be no additional cost to Nigerians. So the 2017 standard, which was passed by the council, by the Federal Executive Council too, was the standard we are supposed to be following now. It's NIS 116-2017. Now, the adulterated product you mentioned, there are certain ways this could have been addressed. First, we have independent accredited firms overseas, where every manufactured product has to go through them so they can certify who produced it, they can certify the product is up to standard. So ideally, these 4 companies that imported the oil, they could have gone through that route, where they can ask an IAF like Ecotechna, SGS, or Intertech to say, okay, this is the oil we are going to bring to Nigeria, can you check it for us? Then they will check it and say, okay, they give them a SUNCAP certificate and they bring it. On the other hand, when they bring it in here, DPR, which is the regulator in the oil industry, which is the NDPR now, the new organization, ideally, they were supposed to, that would be the area where they can check. Now, we have the ability to check those products in Nigeria. In our Oba complex, we have a lab that can do that easily. So we are trying to work on a collaboration now with the DPR where we will be able to help them. If the product is already in Nigeria, they can bring it to us within a few minutes. We can tell them what the contents are. But the standards are already set. All those adulterated items like methanol and all that are clearly stated in the standards. So essentially, standard organization can help if we collaborate, but it's not an exclusive area where we can accept responsibility. In addition to the fact that also, if we happen to be at the ports when these products are coming in, we could easily say, okay, hold on, wait a minute. This tanker bringing this oil, we're going to take a sample, we'll take it to our lab, check it, and then alert DPR and say, hey, this product is below standard. We are not at the port. So we don't have the ability, even if we are allowed to do it, to go into the ports and check these items. And that's one of the reasons why we keep insisting. 85% of the products coming into this country come through the ports. We need to be there. We are not going to interfere with the flow of business. Our responsibility is just to look at quality of a product, authenticity, stuff like that, which you cannot tell from scanning. You cannot tell. An average person, like a custom officer, may not necessarily know the difference between standard iron and steel and a substandard iron and steel. They don't have the training to do that. They don't have the equipment to do that. So this is the issue. It's a little bit complicated, but we do have certain responsibility, and that responsibility, if allowed, should probably help the consumers in the country.
There are two things you said that I want to develop a bit further. The first is the issue of a number of agencies doing regulation.
Yes.
And that gives me the impression that there's a difference between regulation and standardization.
Yes.
Because people often confuse both and assume that one is the same thing as the other.
Yes.
But is it helped by the fact that while SON is to standardize and ensure universal application of the standards, there are these other agencies that are responsible for smaller and specific bits, like you mentioned NAFDAC, which is in charge of food and drugs.
Yes.
There are others which are responsible for other products and goods and services. Does it help that you have so many agencies in the first place that are doing all these things? And then secondly, the agencies are there. Is there a framework within which they collaborate to ensure that in the fight or in the movement of the various agencies, something doesn't get through because nobody is looking at that point in time?
Well, the first question is, does it help to have multiple agencies? No, it doesn't. That's why there was a committee that recommended removing some of the agencies we have in the federal government, and thankfully the secretary to the federal government is already working on that harmonization.
You're referring to the
Orosanye report, yes. So that is being worked on. The duplication of those industries, like I mentioned to you earlier when we are having an off-camera discussion, we have this fire brigade approach to problems. Like when there was this building that was collapsed, and there is a movement in the National Assembly by some individuals to create an agency that monitors building. But standard organization for 50 years monitors standards of cement, iron and steel, everything related to building. So the issue couldn't have been to create an agency to chase a problem. The issue would have been to work on strengthening those agencies to do their job. Now, the other question you ask is, do we have parameters that we collaborate with?
Yes, the framework within which everybody is able to say, look, this is what we found out.
We have a lot of MOUs with organizations, like the NEMSA, like the Federal Consumer Protection
Agency,
those agencies, we have MOUs together, where the areas that we have in common, we collaborate. Areas that they will help us follow, we follow. Like the Electrical Regulation Agency, we have MOUs with them, and we work together with them very well. So the issue usually is the application of the MOUs, and then the following up, which we are doing that now more robustly because both agencies realize the importance of working together. In that vein, actually, we are working together with the new agency, the Nigerian Midstream and DPR, NDPR. The new head of that organization has reached out to me, and we are sitting together to see where we have areas of common interest in the oil and gas industry, where they will collaborate with us so that we can work these things out. Actually, this was started way before the adulterated issue came through. And when this problem started, we actually talked a few times to see what we can do to help. So yes, there is collaboration between the agencies.
You mentioned the fact, and at that time it was not just the Standards Organization alone.
Mm-hmm.
A number of agencies were withdrawn from the ports, both the airports and the seaports, through which many things, because Nigeria imports a whole lot of things.
Everything.
And at that time, there were people who thought that this amounted to throwing away the baby with the bathwater, simply because there were a few malpractices.
Yes.
Now, this issue with the adulterated fuel, you mentioned that if Sun was at the ports, even if it escaped the pre-shipment inspection, when it got here, Sun could have intervened, gotten a sample before it went into the system. And found out what was eventually found out. But by the time it was found out, it was already in the system, which is why it is causing the kind of logjam that is going on currently. I then asked the question, is it possible then, in your view, to make this a bit more strengthened so that this kind of situation we have, in this case with fuel, will not repeat itself with other things? The buildings that you mentioned. Everyone feels that they have a right, quantity surveyors, architects, all these people have some committee or organization monitoring buildings. But that's after the buildings are being put up. The materials that go into the buildings are supposed to be the job of Sun, but nobody's talking to you. It is in that context that I talk about what I mentioned earlier about the framework of collaboration and interaction, and maybe some level of pyramid where everybody knows that, oh, look, if this is the subject, then you go to elsewhere.
You see, you raised two issues. First, the port issue. 2010-11, the previous administration had problems with the ease of doing business. There were too many agencies doing so many different inspections, and they felt they need to streamline it. The original idea was to have like a central clearing area where all the agencies will have this collaboration with the computers and the information and everything. So then in that case, there's minimal physical contact. It only happens when it's necessary. Well, that unfortunately was not handled properly, because when you take Standard Organization of Nigeria, we set the standards for everything. Then we regulate almost everything except food and drug. So essentially, if food and drug is 20% of other items that comes to Nigeria, the remaining 80%, we regulate them. So essentially, you set standards. Standards are, this item has to look like this, or has to weigh like this, has to look like this. That is set for every product in the country by us. And then regulation is, have you followed these standards? Or are you going to do this? Then 10 out of 2 items go to NAFDAC, and the remaining 8 are ours. So if you take NAFDAC and so on and put it on one place, and you put customs on one side, that is 100% of all the products that come to Nigeria. So ideally, what should have happened then was to leave customs, because it's their responsibility, then to bring NAFDAC and to bring SON together as quality checking agencies and regulators. Then we put measures to make sure people's products are not delayed at the port because of inspection. But the issue was, it was mishandled in such a way that we are outside looking in. And honestly, what is happening in the market right now with all the substandard goods in is an evidence that the process is not working. You cannot regulate standards from the outside. And the people in the inside don't have the ability to check those standards. So essentially, there has to be some kind of review to make sure these things happen. Besides, I honestly, as a Nigerian, feel that ease of doing business does not necessarily mean ease of import. No country survives an open border policy where everything that wants to come to your country just comes in. So that's a very important aspect. And we are working to get the right attention to make sure we have that ability to do our job. So it's a very important aspect of our job. But I like to assure you that we are working on it, and it's going to get to a point where we are able to do our take care of our responsibility.
Let's leave the issue of the fuel, the adulteration, and all of that for a minute, and come to the other issue you raised, because that's something else that happens a lot right across the country, where you mentioned the issue of buildings.
Yes.
Again, we get to hear about the problem only when the building collapses. And then people start talking about, look at the metal that was used for the pillars and so on. And then the question arises, how did those get to that site? How were they bought in to the country? Who brought them in? And then SON gets mentioned.
Yes.
Fairly or unfairly, you can explain that. But the question is, again, is this also a function of what you just talked about, the fact that the import process doesn't have you, and you are the ones who have the ability to do this?
That's exactly the issue. That's exactly the answer to that question. That if we are there, we have the ability to keep those things going. One thing Nigerians may not necessarily know, the 2015 Act of SON, which was passed by the National Assembly, signed by the President, specifically clearly says, unfortunately, it applies only to government projects. But we can, with the help of the state governments and other agencies, make it part of the state government policy. The Act clearly stated that any building or any contract that requires products that are standardized must be authenticated by SON before the contractor is paid. So, for example, if you are building a building for the government or anybody, part of the requirement, if it was followed, would have been for them to bring this certification. I bought steel. Where do you buy it from? Does it have SON certification? Does it have MANCAP certification? Does it have approval from SON? And then you bought cement. Oh, which company is it? Does it have certification? If you do that before you pay the contractor, you see that most of these issues will be avoided or minimized. But unfortunately, the law is clearly stated there, but most contracts and buildings were done and paid without that. And then the other issue is with the building materials you're talking about. You see, fortunately for SON, majority of the locally produced items in the country are very up to standard. And they are so up to standard that people actually try to fake them.
You mean things produced locally?
Yes, locally. For example, our cable industry in Nigeria, our lubricant industry in Nigeria, they are doing so well that individuals are faking that product. So most of the problems we are having in this country are products that are imported into the country. And because these products are imported and we don't have 100% access to them before they are cleared, then there's little we can do. Because if you chase a product to the market, the problem is the markets are so big and sometimes so lawless that they attack government agencies. In November last year, we went to the Apple market in Abuja to just take out used tires, because used tires are illegal. There is no law or standard that allows anybody to import used tires into the country. We have hundreds and hundreds of containers of those used tires in that market. But when we went there with police, mind you, with police, DSS, and everybody else, but we are overpowered. People were shooting guns at us, breaking our vehicles that are labeled with government agency vehicles. We have videos. It was taken even in your channels.
Yes,
there was news item. So the problem is, as much as we like to think that our 1,000 employees can go to 2,000 markets in Nigeria to individually enforce, we don't have the people and the security to protect our people to do their enforcement. An ideal situation is to nip it at the source. The person bringing
that is at the point at which it is coming in.
If somebody is bringing 100 containers of used tires, it's easy for us to catch him, that individual, before he gets into the community and he gets protected by other, criminals like him. So essentially, we could have stopped that item right there from the beginning before it came into the market. So now, we are at loss. We have people's kids who are working for Standard Organization of Nigeria. These are very smart individuals. They went to university. They are well trained. Their responsibility is to check for standards, not to enforce, not to chase a lorry or a container or go to a warehouse and open the warehouse and start checking and risking their lives. We have people threatened. We even have individuals killed for just trying to do their responsibility.
One thing you mentioned there now, which is very important, is that there's ensuring compliance with standards.
Yes.
And then there's enforcing compliance.
Yes.
They're not quite the same thing.
No, they're not.
And SON's job is the first.
It's two, both.
Both, but you speak about the capacity to do it. 1,000 personnel, 200 million Nigerians.
Well, you see, that's why I mentioned to you our local industries are doing very well, because we don't only standardize them, but we enforce that. So the issue of enforcement, we do that relatively well with our local industries. And that is the reason why, if you remember, we mentioned when you correlate standards with security. Yeah. People will look at you and go, what does that have to do with it? What does 0.2 millimeters of something have to do with the security of somebody dealing with a bandit? Well, the issue is this. When our local industries follow the standards, which most of the time they do, it's a cost item. So they follow the standards, they pay taxes, they employ people, people pay taxes, the people who are employed help their family. If, for example, if you have 1,000 employees, by the time you do the progression, there's like 100,000 enjoying under that 1,000 employees. A food seller is coming there to sell food. So the problem is when people import products, an average person like you and I maybe I have $20,000 in my pocket. Somebody says, oh, there is a market for cable, go and buy cable and sell it. People are building all over Nigeria. So I go to another country, a third country, and I say, hey, I want to buy cables. And then they ask you, what quality do you want? Because I've been through that before. A long time ago, I tried to import some things when I was in America. And the first thing the guy asked me is, are you shipping to America or are you shipping to somewhere else? I said, Nigeria. He said, well, in Nigeria, what quality do you want? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if you are sending to Nigeria, we can make it 90%, we can make it 10%.
Actually, I heard that there's something called African quality. So
I said, but what if I'm taking it to America? He said, no, in America, it's going to be the standard quality because of the consequences. So now, this individual goes with a little money in his pocket, buy a container full of products, brings them to Nigeria. First, they were substandard. And the place they buy them from, because they have economy of scale, even if you buy the standard one, it's still going to be cheaper than the Nigerian one. Then, you bring it in, and you pay whatever it is you pay, you sell it in the market. Now, this individual in a local town, in Akure or somewhere, helping the whole community to go up, now has to compete with a cheap substandard product. So eventually they close factory. When they close factory, there will be unemployment. The government cannot employ everybody. So now this youth, new graduates, old people, they all have to find a way to make a living. That's why you have banditries, terrorism. I'm not saying all terrorists are unemployed people who are looking for work, but majority of unemployment causes this kind of instability. So see the relationship between standards, quality, and insecurity. And it's very, very important that both the public and other individuals realize when you buy things that are substandard, reach out to us and let us know so we can follow it up. Because the country and the security of this country depends on it.
When you say that, the one thing that looms large is smuggling.
Yes.
And smuggling side by side with our trade policies. For example, as Nigeria, we have policies that allow movement of goods and services right through ECOWAS.
Yes.
So someone can bring in something from outside Africa, land it in Dakar, and then it will travel through that region and come into Nigeria almost unchecked because it's free movement.
Yes.
We've already talked about the fact that your organization and organizations like that are not at the ports.
Yes.
So you are having to chase the goods when they're in the market, when reports reach you that such goods are in the market. What's the way of stopping that? Because earlier on, we've also talked about the fact that you don't want a situation where you hamper trade. But at the same time, that is not the same thing as saying everything should be or can be allowed to come in. So it's like, what exactly is there then to do? Because it seems like the chicken and the egg.
Yeah, well, one of the easiest things to do, and you know, in life there are really no easier solutions. But one of the first easiest thing to do is to rectify our presence in the port. That's one. The issue of neighboring countries with this African free trade, generally, and I really say this carefully, generally, if a product comes through a neighboring African country, except it is labeled in transit, where technically they are not supposed to check those products because they are in transit. They will only be checked when they arrive in their destination. Most of these products are standard goods because no country generally allows substandard products to come into their country hoping 100% of it will be exported to another country. I mean, it's reckless to think that will happen like that. So honestly, it's our strong opinion that we will not 100% block substandard goods from coming to this country, but our presence will make a big impact in the whole process. And we have studies that we have, commissioned for people to study the level of substandard goods in the market and how to go about, working with them. Now, if we have a robust team of police, military, and social security that we can go to, for example, Aspanda in broad daylight and take out what is substandard, that would have been easy to do. Or if there is an ability, a system in the computer that will say, this product looks like it's a bad product, let Sun come in and look at it. Like the computer system in the port. If that system works, that minimizes the ability to have individuals physically inspecting. Because, for example, some of these people, what they do is they will go and get certification from an IAF for pre-shipment certification. They will go and get certification for, say, for example, toothpick. Then they go to a genuine toothpick factory, get a certificate, and then the IAF will say, we approve it. Now they go and buy something.
The IAF being?
Independent International Accredited Firm.
Okay.
Yeah, so these companies will do that. But then what will happen is you go and buy another product. So you put that in the container, but your bill of lading is going to say the real item. So now you have new tires in your container instead of toothpicks. So you have certificate for toothpicks, bill of lading says tires. So it's in the system in the computer, but we don't have access to those computers. So if our people will have access to those 100%, all they have to do is just take a certification from the internationally accredited firm that says this item, and then bill of lading from the central bank that says this item. You compare them. When you compare items, out of 100 items, if 20 don't match, all you have to do is flag them. And then the customs will say, no, someone wants to look at these 20 containers because there is a discrepancy between bill of lading or from M and the import permit or whatever it is. Then we will do our job more efficiently. But the issue is we are doing these things blindly. Once in a while, we get a break, we get information that this is the problem. But majority of the time, we don't have the ability to do that. So it's like having somebody telling them to fight a boxing match or a UFC, and you tie both hands behind their backs and expect them to win. It's just not possible.
COVID-19 introduced some complications.
Yes.
I mean, as you've already pointed out, some of these problems existed
Yes.
and have been in existence.
Yeah.
But the change in the mode of human interaction also had its impact on all what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because then so many people couldn't be in one location. So even when you had information to go there and verify meant exposing such personnel to the possibilities that come with interaction at that point. Today, it seems as if there's a consensus that we're going to have to live with COVID
Yes.
for quite a bit. So
Yes.
things are returning somewhat to normal.
Yes.
The question would then be, how much of change would we need to put to the systems you and I have spoken about so far in order to accommodate the disruption that COVID has brought about? Because I know, for example, in the UK, and I don't think that problem has gone away even as we speak, that they're having difficulties with inspection as well, particularly, of course, with their own departure from the EU. I mean, that was a complication, but even the basic inspections across Europe, they're having the same problem right now. So, I mean, in our own situation, do you see us even addressing that? Or are we going to also have to live with the fact that periodically from time to time, we're going to have to deal with collapsing buildings and adulterated fuel?
In our case, the Standard Organization of Nigeria, we're inspecting items. We're not inspecting human beings. So basically, if we have a suspected container, essentially, we just open the container, look at it, test the product, and lock the container.
But there's people who do that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, but the people are the people. You see, the interaction is not between people and people anymore. It's between people and items. And then if you have people and people interaction, for example, if you need the owner to be present, well, you wear the protection, you wear your mask, you wear you wash your hands and wear your sanitizers. These are items that we have to. It's the same thing as you go to the hospital every day if you need to go to the hospital. You interact with the doctor. He wears gloves. He wears masks, and then he takes care of you. So it's just an issue of precaution. And the good thing is, we being there, we have taken a lot of measures over the years where the original problems that were rightfully pointed out to kick us out of the port were addressed. See, when I first started this job, I moved all the employees that are found at the port out of the port, take them to other places to prevent people getting used to this idea. And, because they say familiarity breeds contempt. In this case, it breeds corruption. So I moved those people out. We moved those people out. We transferred them out. And then 6 months later, we transferred those people out. So we are making this rotation where nobody gets too comfortable, too complacent to create a problem. In addition, we have a big warehouse in Amodofin, which is very close to the port, where if for any reason an item, a container or containers, we can take up to 1,000 containers in that place. If a container has a problem, we don't have to keep it in the port and block other containers from passing. We move it quietly to that area where the owners and us will sit down and look at the containers together and find out where the problem is. If the quality is something that can be adjusted, we adjust the quality and let the containers go. If it's something that is beyond redemption, then we go to court and get permissions and we confiscate the goods. So the issue of congestion or interaction between individuals has already been addressed. COVID is here with us. Thankfully, in our country, it's not as bad as in Europe. But people go to the airport every day. You just wear protection. So our inspections will still be, I expect you to be cautious or be careful. They're not going to affect it. And mind you, I mean, it's a different issue, but we helped in standardizing most of these COVID items. In fact,
well, actually, I was coming to that.
Yes,
that was going to be my next question.
Yes, so
that was because a lot of things came in with COVID.
Yes.
Nigeria had to go buy a lot of things which we didn't have,
yes,
including vaccines.
Yes.
Which we don't produce. We didn't have the facilities for. And in many instances we'd never heard of. I know that in many parts, for example, of Asia, people had been used to wearing masks because of air quality and all that.
And the SARS.
Now, we here, face masks came with COVID. There were Nigerians who had never heard of face masks before then. And so many other things. What role did Sun play in that, and what was the experience like?
Well, originally, when the COVID was at its peak, it was realized that the suppliers from outside the country may not necessarily be able to keep up with the demands here. So a lot of companies on their own converted their facilities to produce sanitizers, masks, and other items. And Sun, actually, we are among the first people in the world, not just in Nigeria, in the world to bring out standards on face masks and sanitizers. So we were able to do that quickly because we have a standard department. We have a robust technical committee that we use, with our stakeholders. So we quickly did that, and that helped a lot. A lot of things are happening, and we in the Sun Organization of Nigeria, we will not only facilitate these things, we'll make it easier for individuals. So we do have these standards which were made quickly before, people know it. And the Presidential Task Force is what they are using to judge imported items and manufactured items locally.
How about vaccines?
Vaccines, like I said, the president, the federal government is working on getting a facility from, to be able to do it here in Nigeria. I know from the news item that South Africa was recently able to produce a COVID vaccine. And we have the same or better facility in this country to do that.
No, I was talking about the ones that we've been using so far, which are mostly imported.
Well,
does Sun have any access to them to check their quality?
Well, the thing is that's a NAFDAC.
Okay, because it's a drug.
It's a drug. So essentially, we don't have, but NAFDAC is doing an excellent job of that. A lot of the issues that come up from the news items, again, I hear, is that some of the vaccines come in with shorter expiration. You have an item expiring in a month or two, you can't move it from Lagos to Yobe within that time frame, especially considering the packaging you need, how you have to get some cooling packages to do everything with it. So it's complicated, but I honestly think that we are in the right direction in that aspect.
You mentioned corruption earlier on, and I want to take a look at that. Your staff, 1,000 strong and so on, hold the fate of billions of dollars in their hands, approvals, non-approvals. And there's a great deal of temptation in there. As I asked the DG of NAFDAC, I said, I've brought in 100 containers of tires, and you are about to seize them all because they are substandard. And I'm looking at 500 million naira going down the drain.
Yes.
And so if I say, look, I'll give you 100 million to let this pass, it's still profitable for me. And for a civil servant whose lifetime earnings would not be that, the temptation is high. How do you motivate such people, given our environment, to resist?
Well, you see, you ask a very sophisticated question. First of all, people don't smuggle items that are not profitable. And when it comes to smuggling and profitability, corruption is definitely number one. And in every activity in human life, there is temptation. That's why people like me are fat, because every time I pass the fridge, I reach out and grab something and I eat it. If I have tuwo in front of me, instead of eating small, I eat the whole damn thing. So it's a natural instinct to satisfy a certain requirement. But the problem is, in a society, you make the consequences more than the temptation. I know for sure in Son, any employee caught with his hands in the quickie jar will be dismissed. Now they can take a risk and risk their job or be corrupted. So, any father of 2 children will tell you that they know what their children could do, but they are not saying their children will not do what was allegedly they did. So there is a possibility. We're exposed to a lot of potential corrupt situation. But one of the things we do is minimize the interaction by moving people around, put up the consequences a bit higher so that you have to look at the cost of what you're doing. And then minimize even the possibility of that individual being alone with our employees. Because when we do inspections, we have a group of people that do inspections. So those group of people, they are diverse. You cannot just come in to one person and say, let me do this for you, and you look the other way. And there are items that is just, for example, tires, used tires. There is just no way anybody can justify. You see, you have to have discretion to be corrupt. There is no way anybody can justify allowing a used tire into the country. So if you come to me and I take the money from you, allow a used tire to come in, you get caught, I get caught, we go to court. I get dismissed because I'm an employee, you get prosecuted. You lose your product, you lose your money. So the items, as you have to have consequences in our society, because the Europeans and the Americans are no less corrupt than us. They are all human beings. But the risk does not justify the means for them, because there's consequences. People get locked up for a long time. So because of that, they rather stay in their lane and not risk it. But if a society is so open to corruption in the sense that there's no consequences, if I catch you and you start screaming, that's because we're not from the same village, and then everybody says, okay, let him go, he will not do it again. Or it's the devil who made me do it, let's forgive him and go. Then that is basis for corruption. Corruption is not because there's money on the table, it's because there's no consequences. When you have consequences, people think. Recently, you hear billions of naira confiscated from an unknown individual. The EFCC discovered properties. They said, okay, these properties are illegal. They come to you and say, it belongs to you. You say, no, wallahi, it doesn't belong to me. They say, fine, it doesn't belong to you? No problem. They went and do a publication in the newspaper. These so addresses were looking for the owner. Nobody showed up. And guess what happens? It gets confiscated. So the consequences are there in our society. We just have to enforce it. Are you telling me that individual or those individuals who own these billion naira properties don't like their property? But they now know there's consequences. So they did not come out to claim it. So they just watch it, just fizzle away in front of them.
You're a pharmacist.
Yes.
You said that at the beginning, and you've been a pharmacist for quite a while.
Yes.
So I'm interested in your view about our health system generally, especially because you've also worked elsewhere.
Yes.
And so there's some basis for comparisons, and you can see how the two systems or more operate. Many people didn't really talk about Nigeria's health system until COVID came along.
Yes.
And then we were found very seriously wanting, so to speak, lack of investment and all of that. In your own thinking and from what you know, are we over-exaggerating the deficiency in Nigeria's health system? Well,
you see, a health system involves individuals, involves facilities, involves the professionals. When it comes to professionals in Nigeria, we're among the top in the world. Because every country you go to, every country, I don't care, you can think of any country in the Pacific, maybe a small island in the Pacific. If they have a doctor who is foreign and he's black, he's most likely a Nigerian. I went to the US with a Nigerian degree in ABU. I didn't have to go to school in America. I worked successfully for 31 years as a clinical pharmacist with a Nigerian degree. There are other Nigerians trained in Nigeria doing the same thing in the United States. In fact, in the pharmacy I worked, we have about 5 Nigerian pharmacists out of 200 there. So we have quality professionals. You go to Saudi Arabia, you go to England, without Nigerians, the English system will not survive. That's why they have special visas for Nigerians, graduates. Now, the other question is the facilities. Now, infrastructure generally is a problem in this country. That's why the government is working very hard to build the infrastructure. We need railways, we need roads, we need electricity. The same thing with the hospitals. We started with government owning hospitals. And then we graduated into private hospitals. But the problem is, even within the private sector, either because they don't have enough loan facilities to buy $1 million machine in the hospital or to build a $1 billion facility, call it a complex, they have to manage what they have. So essentially, the infrastructure issue is the problem with the Nigerian healthcare system, not the brain. The brain we have. And it takes a lot of investment in terms of the industry, for the industry to be good. I mean, we have areas where we still have quality hospitals in this country. But is that enough for a 200 million population? No, it's not. So it has to be a holistic approach. We have to find ways that our banks are no longer going to be interest collecting organizations. They now be money lending organizations. Because everywhere else in the world, the banks chase people and beg them to take the money, because that's the only way they make money. So the banks should be involved in financing healthcare projects. The banks should be involved in financing industries in Nigeria. And then the government is doing the best they could. They could do better, at least in building infrastructure for everybody.
That leaves me with, I guess we can call them your primary constituency.
Yes.
The indigenous manufacturers. And you've spoken about them earlier.
Yes.
Because you say quite a lot of them are doing very well.
Yes, yes.
To the extent that people now want to
fake their products.
Yes, yes. But you also mentioned that even the ones that are not fake, that are coming from outside, are of such costing that the ones produced domestically are not able to compete with them in terms of pricing.
May not be able to
compete
yes.
with them in terms of pricing.
Yes.
And that therefore the customer comes there, sees 2 light bulbs and says, how much is this one? They say it's 500 naira. They say, what's the wattage? They say 60 amps. They say, how much is this one? They say it's 300. They say, what's the wattage? They say it's 80 amps. And he says, why should I pay more for less? Give me this. That leaves out the question of the quality of what he's buying.
Yes.
But he's thinking of the cost.
Cost, yeah.
I want you to talk a bit about the statistics, because it appears as if there are 2 sides. There are people saying the manufacturers are not doing well. Then there are those who are saying, like you, that they are doing very well.
Well, a simple answer, a very simplistic answer is there are non-Nigerians heavily involved in our industries in this country. I assure you, if they are not making profit, they will not be here. They are not here for charity. As we talk, 2 weeks ago, we went to last week, we went to an iron ore extracting, iron pellet producing facility being actually built right now on the Kujeni. Is a village between Abuja and Kaduna. It's in Kaduna State. These individuals invested close to $600 million to extract iron ore and produce iron pellets. So the issue is Nigeria is a very profitable country when it comes to investments for factory owners. Now, could it be better? Yes. You don't need to have diesel to run your facility. You don't need to buy petrol to run your facility. You don't need to have worry about security when your goods are moving from one point to another to be delivered, because now you're worried about this insecurity here, insecurity there. These are all additional costs to our industries. So it has to be something that is approached holistically in the sense that we encourage our banks to provide facilities. We encourage our customers, which is the industry, to pay those facilities back. They just don't borrow money and then start buying fleets of airplanes and enjoying themselves. Because we do have evidence of some individuals here, their industry is doing very well, then they borrow money, use foreign exchange, and then they start importing Bentleys and airplanes. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen. Then we need to make sure that people who pay taxes are protected. So individuals importing goods that are substandard, we have to make sure that these substandard goods are not allowed in the market. And we need to make sure individuals bringing good standard goods, they are charged the appropriate charges at the port. Because most countries in the world use charges, tariffs, to help the competition at home. Iron and steel industry in America and Europe were protected for years by tariffs from various countries. Farmers up to today in Europe are protected by tariffs. Yeah. There are certain things you cannot import into Europe, no matter what good quality they are, because you'll be charged a lot of tariff on it. So it's a combination. We cannot give up on our industry because, trust me, no country survives lack of industries. We cannot survive 100% on imports alone.
That's a lot of food for thought. Madam Farouk Salim, thank you so much for your thought.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's our program today. We would, of course, like to hear from you on the conversation. Our social media handles are right there on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program via our podcast. Please visit our website, channelstv.com/podcast to get started. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Goodbye.